Okay, you're right. Welcome, Kev. Not used to seeing you here at 8 o'clock, and Roger's here, so we're all good to go. I haven't sent the link to Ronnie. There we go. He's already in here. He's beat me to it. Did you send him a link?
You talking to me?
Yeah, I've only literally just sent him a link. Either he was literally on the ball, or you.
No, I was. I beat the link, Andy. If you're talking about me,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I managed to find it all on my own.
Literally, I was gonna say. I had just pasted it, and I saw you
The
join.
first time
Yeah,
for everything, Ronnie.
That's it, and
yeah. I'm getting a
we're
little
all
bit.
here for 8 o'clock. That's
I,
incredible.
I'm getting a bit more down with the youth now with this TikTok thing. You
How
know
is
these
everyone? You
young
all good?
guys
Hello,
like you and
Joanna.
young Roger. You know these youngsters.
I know, it's terrible, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. You see, it takes me a while to catch up with you lot at my age.
Yeah, us whippersnappers.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Evening, everyone. I think it's the first time I've been on for 8 o'clock for quite a while.
Yeah, it's about 3 or 4 weeks, isn't it now?
Yeah,
I
it's
think,
you're on first, Kev. So nick us off and get on the stage.
Nick us off and get on the
Is that what
stage.
it is? Is
And yeah, a partner of mine used to say that.
But yeah, I mean, if you want to, Kev,
it-
if you want to start us off by talking about last weekend,
Yeah, can do. Last weekend I was at the Tyneside Music and Vegan Festival. It's hosted by Northeast Animal Rights, in Newcastle University. Well, Newcastle Student Union, even, sorry. So yeah, it was did one last year. That was the first one. It was a big success. So they've done it again this year, and they're going to do it again next year. They do it to raise money for for Northeast Animal Rights, the charitable group, and invite both traders and activists to come. But they also inject a bit of vegan culture in there as well. So we have acts on stage. So we've got people doing music, and I get up and do me poetry as well. So yeah, I took the opportunity to speak to some groups that I had some questions for that were there in attendance. Obviously, I was on the stage. Had some fantastic plant-based food, as you do when you go to these things, I suppose. But yeah, so the people that I was probably most eager to speak to that were there, because I didn't really know much about their group, was Exposing Cruelty. And I'm glad I did, to be honest with you, because I had made an assumption of what the group was about, which seemed like, when you look at a lot of their marketing, seems like a vivisection, kind of single issue campaign group, if you will. And initially, that's what they started out as, and that is their ultimate goal, was and still is to completely eradicate vivisection from the world. What they've realised along the way, however, is you can't get there, because every time you uncover a stone, there's a whole other mess of animal rights that you've got to go through for your single issue campaign. So they've realised very quickly that actually they don't just need to be thinking about vivisection, it's the whole mindset of animal use that's the problem. And that's what they're campaigning for, basically. But they do things like, so they liberate, they run a sanctuary down in Evesham as well, and they also have campaigns that they do as well. So they've got petitions and stuff that go to Parliament, because they've realised that actually you need to educate the public, you need to do your direct action, you need to house the animals that you're doing the direct action for, but you also need to change the legislation behind it. So yeah, it was really beneficial talking to them about what they do. Spoke to a couple of lovely ladies that are kind of key within the group.
was
And
was
the
one,
other,
was one of them Laurie? Was Laurie there?
possibly, yeah.
Yeah.
Laurie's with Happy Vegan Clothing, isn't she?
Yes. Yeah. I
Yeah,
know
yeah.
Laurie.
I
Yes.
mean, I
Yeah.
see. Like, I didn't realise this was exposing cruelty. But I think it's T.
Yeah, no,
at
T,
MBR when I went down, and I thought she was great and
yeah,
totally wasted. So I was actually quite excited to hear that they got broken away from MBR and had sort of made these realizations and stuff like that. Because they actually sound, besides the name, like they're ticking all the boxes. Like they've done
Yeah.
the research and they've actually seen where the problems are, and they're trying to move away from that as opposed to just falling into the same holes.
Yeah, that was it. To be fair, mate. Yeah, and they have stepped away from Camp Beagle more so because they only really care about beagles, and their mission statement now is not to eradicate all animal testing. It's to eradicate. I think it's about 60. I mean, I might be getting the numbers wrong. It's about the most intrusive 60%. I think it is, and they're looking at that because that's the ones that are done on dogs.
Yeah.
So obviously they have stepped away from Camp Beagle because of those reasons. But the more I spoke to them, the more I realised that actually they did initially start off as a single issue campaign, if you will, for want of a better term. But they've realised that actually on the way down the journey of trying to get there, there's a whole mess of crap that you've got to basically work with as well. Otherwise, your issue that you've got the most focus on, and they do maintain that, you're never going to get there. So that's the reason that they've went more around animal rights, which I was like, I'm so glad I come and spoke to you because it's all abolition, rights based, everything that was coming out of the mouth, and it was absolutely fantastic. And they've got a festival at their sanctuary in Evesham on, I think it's the 19th and 20th, I think it is, of
August, yeah,
August.
yeah.
yeah.
Which
It's very good because it's like a grassroots sort of version of vegan camp out.
Yes.
Yeah, it is, yeah. And the good thing with this is that they're doing
Yeah.
it to raise funds so they can buy the land that they're currently renting to make it more
Yes,
sustainable. So
it's actually basically that's the sanctuary is um, the farm animal sanctuary, and it's not actually run by Exposing Cruelty, but Exposing Cruelty are involved with it because I mean that
yeah,
sanctuary's been going for many years.
Yeah, yeah.
And what's happening is the landlord wants to sell the land. So, and they're worried, very worried that he'll sell it from under their feet and they're going to have to move and they've got loads of animals there. So they're trying to raise the money to buy the land off him. So they can stay there permanently. And that's the situation that
Where
they've got.
else would it be, Ronnie?
Sorry?
Where else would it be?
How do you mean?
Selling under their feet. Where else would it be?
Oh, well, yeah, it would be under their feet. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, not going to be over their head. Yeah, you are right, Roger. There, a technical
yeah,
point. Yes, so that's the situation. That's why they need to raise a couple of £1 million or something to to buy it.
yeah,
But the idea of this having the sort of grassroots vegan camp out, I think, is really good
Yeah.
because you're going to have, first of all, it's nowhere near as expensive as the big vegan camp out.
No, I
no,
mean
but
it's I can't believe how cheap it is for
Yeah,
what
yeah,
potentially they're on on offer. Especially as like the camping part is only to double your price. So I mean I think it's about 75 quid for a weekend less than camp out, and you
yeah.
actually the money's all going to a good cause.
I think
yes,
we've managed to book because we're staying in a hotel because I've got no camping kit, and by the time I buy a camping kit to use once, it's going to be a fortune.
Yeah.
So we're staying in a hotel when we come down, and I think it's worked out not a lot more expensive than what it would have been if I'd done camp out.
Yeah.
Um, so
And you've got proper facilities. Oh, actually, they've got showers at camp out because so
yeah, so
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the good thing is that if it because it obviously there are people that can't afford to go to the big vegan camp out. Um, Possibly for two reasons. First of all, because of the cost of it, and secondly, for reasons of travelling. You know, whereas people that live within within kind of reach of that sanctuary would be able to go to that camp out, and they wouldn't have to travel so far. And plus, it would be cheaper for them to do it. So it's kind of, I think it's more of a like, has more of a regional appeal. To be honest, that's what I think, and I'd like to see these things happen everywhere. I mean, animal sanctuaries have got land where they can host events like
Yeah, I
this.
mean there is
Yeah.
one also that's I think it's the 9th, 10th and 11th of June. That's at the retreat in Kent.
Yes,
And
yeah,
that's literally that's only £50 as well for the
yeah,
weekend
yeah,
or 100 to camp, which again is considerably cheaper than camp out. And obviously, if you're in the south or anywhere down there, it's much easier to get to. So like this, yeah, I totally agree. It'd be nice if there could be like half a dozen or so scattered all over the place, so that
yeah.
everyone could attend one.
Yes, because I hope this, other sanctuaries will. I mean, obviously, there are some ways it can't be the same as the big camp out. For a start, that you can't have like really loud music there.
No,
Uh, you and because obviously you've got to be aware of like disturbing the animals there.
yeah, yeah.
But then that for me that's a bonus. I don't want loud music.
Well, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like these aren't supposed to be like that anyway.
No, they're not meant to
Yeah.
emulate. They're
You
not.
know, I mean, a sort of a folk band and that kind of thing, that's only
Yeah,
going to escalate to so loud. It's not like you can have a rave until 2 a.m. and there's going to be flashing lights and booming music. Like,
no,
no, I totally agree. It's not that kind of festival in general, is it? If you
no.
want that, you go to Reading or Leeds or whatever.
Yeah, and what you can have is you can have local musicians taking part, and you can have it. I mean, the cost for someone to do a stall at Vegan Camp Out is like astronomical. It's like really, really
Yeah,
expensive.
it's a lot of money. Whilst I remember, I don't know the dates of this one, but there is one also this summer, definitely at the Queen's Head pub in Wales. They've got a mini festival. I think theirs is much smaller than the others, but I'm not 100% sure the date. So there is three other ones, three.
Yeah, and I like to see the spread because, of course, the thing about having regional focus is that you get to talk to people that are in within you know reasonable reach of you, so you can organise stuff with those people, and and it's much better for kind of in that sense for encouraging outreach because the people at those regional festivals are more likely to be from the surrounding area.
Yeah, I
So
mean, I mean, what's the likeliness normally that, like, especially for us, that we'd have a festival like just down the road in Evesham? It would always be like London or
yeah,
somewhere we've got to go miles to.
that's it. Yeah, and it's brilliant for us because, of course, I probably live about the same distance from it as you, Andy. You probably a little bit closer, but it's easy. It's ever so easy reachable. It's only pretty much down the road, and that's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah,
And
exactly. And I mean, like I said, this kind of thing doesn't normally happen with other music festivals and things like that for the most part. You still have to go to one location. So yeah, I think it's a great idea going forward. There could be
yeah,
half a dozen or so of these scattered all over. You know,
I mean, I
I'll
like
have to find out the dates of that Queen's Head one because I
yeah,
know that's definitely this summer as well. And obviously that's in Wales, so there's like some good locations that have been covered this year.
really good. I'd like to see one in every county, to be
Right.
honest,
Yeah.
because I think they're probably now there are so many sanctuaries for farmed animals now that are run by vegans. That there are lots of them because when Roger and I during the lockdown, Roger and I did a like comedy show called Jailhouse Vegans about our amusing time in prison. Strange enough, you can have amusing times in prison, but. And it was to raise money for animal sanctuaries for sort of like really vegan run sanctuaries mainly for farmed animals, and it was really difficult to choose who to raise funds for because there's so many of them now.
Yeah, there are so many. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, I mean, not only is it a good opportunity for all of them to fundraise in terms of tickets and stuff, but even in like the months before, there's nothing stopping them either saying, right, we'd really like to put on a festival this summer, but we need to clear this land, we need to move this from this, we really need some help. Who's around? Because that's a real good incentive for people to get involved in things too.
yes, yeah, yeah. I think it is a really positive development that I'd like to see expand because it's like great for awareness. It's affordable, much more affordable for people, and it's kind of much more localized, better for raising awareness, better for encouraging activism, I think. And the people that can be speaking there can be like, activists from like the local area.
Yeah, yeah, I
The-
agree. Yeah. It's more, and obviously a lot of these festivals, a big percentage of why their tickets are the price that they are is because they've got to pay their speakers who have got to fly over from wherever or
yeah,
whatever. So if the speakers were more localized, like all of that's cut out as well. There's no travel.
yeah,
They can go
yeah,
home afterwards. Cuts all
yeah,
the expenses part out of it.
It would
yeah.
give
It's
you
to,
give
it's totally kind of my cup of tea, that sort of thing.
yeah,
Really is.
it would be a great way of networking as well, wouldn't it? So you could have individuals who are looking to get more active but don't really know what avenue to go down. They could speak to various different people doing various different things, or it could be that actually groups have an opportunity to collaborate a lot more that maybe don't interact with each other in the day to day.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Because I mean, some of the contacts and stuff that you may make at, say, camp out, like the national camp out, you might be like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to get into activism," and they're like, "Oh yeah, run a group. Where are you from?" And they're like from York, and the other person's from Brighton. So
Yeah,
like, you're less likely to get that at these localized events. It's going to be like, "Oh yeah, we run a stall in this particular town," and they're like, "What? That's my town. I didn't know this."
Yeah.
yeah,
Like, you're going to get that exactly.
Yeah, well, I
yeah.
mean, just off the back of doing the festival, I was at obviously. So, I did some poetry when I was on the stage. So I did some animal rights poetry that obviously wasn't directed at vegans. It's directed at non-vegans. But then I did a couple of poems that are directed at vegans because that was my target audience, because that's who was there. So I did a one called "No Farmers, No Future," which was about how actually if we try to just eradicate farming, which seem and hate farmers and attack farmers verbally, which seems to be becoming a bit of a viral thing online when you look at interactions, then actually we're doing ourselves a bit of a disservice because we need to support farmers into a sustainable and ethical business model going forward. Otherwise, we won't have anything to supply our demand when hopefully we come to a plant-based food system. Um, and I did a one called Unseen Victims, which is quite fitting actually with the news about pilgrims because it's a poem from the eyes of a slaughter worker. It talks about how most people, well, a lot of people, sorry, that work in slaughterhouses don't do it through choice. They do it through deprivation, through lack of skills or lack of opportunity. And at the end of the day, my mindset is that we we uh we, we're fighting for the rights, if you will, of all sentient beings. We are looking to prevent harm of all sentient beings, and that includes the human animals as well as the non-human animals, and even those that are left holding a knife, I suppose, at an extreme side. But I wanted to do some controversial stuff to get people talking. And then off the back of that, I got asked to do a fundraiser for a local sab group because they've got a lot of people there that are vegetarian still, and they want us to write a poem about how although they're out helping, they're also hindering. Um, so yeah, I'm gonna do that for a mutual friend of me and Andy. But yeah, and again, that's a network that I wouldn't have created had I not been there. So yeah, it was good. I also spoke to Animal Rebellion, who it was funny because I went from talking to Exposing Cruelty, who I didn't, I didn't have a good grasp of what they did. I had an assumption with the name of what I thought they would be, and it completely blew my mind. And then I went straight over to Animal Rebellion, and they were everything that I expect them to be. Very corporate, very reined in, very limited on what they would talk about, if you will, trying to steer the conversation around the whole kind of using the term animal lovers and focusing on cruelty and that sort of thing. And what I found interesting is you could tell that Exposing Cruelty don't have a PR team. They're not interested. They actually said they're not interested in making headlines. They're interested in action that's meaningful. Whereas Animal Rebellion, obviously, it's a much bigger organization. And of course, because of that, they need to make sure that everyone who represents that organization says the same script or has the same point of view. And it was just interesting how Exposing Cruelty could basically what they felt needed to be done. An animal rebellion, I don't know, it seems a bit more, I don't know, limited, I would say, structured, probably.
But well, it's Animal Rising now, of course, and
Sorry, yes, of
a
course,
couple of
yes.
things. Exposing Cruelty's website is still very much focused on animal experiments. If you
Yeah,
look at it, there isn't anything about anything else on there. Whether that's going to change, I kind of don't know. And they kind of, they kind of did come, they kind of did come out of Camp Beagle. That's where those people kind of came from. That was the idea from the campaign. There were people who were involved in Camp Beagle. And of course, there's been a lot of splits in association with Camp Beagle as well. There's been quite a lot of infighting and stuff go on, and so various groups have kind of come out of that, taking their own, going along their own routes. But maybe they'll change what's on their website. It'd be good if they kind of go, because they need to they fundamentally need to talk about veganism, because the reason we have animal experiments, of course, is because of speciesism. And how do you
Yeah.
challenge speciesism at a fundamental level? It's by educating people to go vegan according to what the true definition of veganism is, isn't it? And that's how they're kind of tackle, the anti-vivisection campaign tackles the problem that is, and they're tackling it at a level that is some way up from what the fundamental problem is. In a sense, they're tackling a symptom rather than the cause of the problem. So you have to kind of tackle
Can I just jump in there,
yeah,
Ronnie? Because there's
yeah,
there's a thing to me from Jad Zier, I think, and
yeah.
yeah, I will get back to you on that. I've got something to say about that, but I don't want to stop your flow, Ronnie. But and
My
thanks.
flow, you do at your peril, Rod. Yeah, I think they wanted you to give a definition of veganism, didn't they, Roger? Wasn't that the question? Which would
Yeah, well, we'll come
yeah,
back to that, and
come back.
thanks to Kev about the. I was going to ask you about the poetry, and the
Yeah,
subsequent question about that is, is it going to be? Are they going to be available online as a kind of performance kind of situation?
so
And then in terms of the groups that you were talking about, I mean, Andy obviously mentioned the name, and obviously that was in the back of your mind as well because you mentioned it too. So you've got a group called Animal Cruelty that seems to be more radical than a group that used to be called Animal Rebellion. So that's a bit ironic in my eyes. But yeah, so yeah, Ronnie. So back to you, I suppose.
well, yeah. You see, so that's now with Animal Rising, I've got quite an insight into them because my wife Louise is involved with them, and she took part. They did an occupation of a dairy farm down in Dorset on uh, yesterday, and she took part in that. And I actually took her down to where they were all staying to go on the action, or where one group of them were staying. And it's very and so through her I've got quite a lot of insights to them. And basically what you've got with Animal Rising is you've got a grassroots that are very that are kind of in general, for the majority, are very animal rights, are very aren't really into the plant-based future thing, who want to promote veganism. Um, uh, and so, and whereas you seem to have this kind of leadership that promoting the plant-based future thing, that the love thing and all that. So there's a real split between the grassroots of it and the people that are kind of laying down what the policy is and what should be said. And it's really interesting because I think a lot of the people that go on the actions say, well, look, I want to take action. I don't like the dairy industry. I don't like the way the dairy industry exploits other animals. And so I want to, I want to get involved in that action. So they're kind of going along, you know, um, getting involved in the action with what you might say that their animal rights sort of stroke vegan head on. That's why they're doing it, right? And then the messaging that comes out of that is controlled by other people is kind of is rather different what the people on the action actually feel and believe. And it's a very strange. It's almost. I mean, Louise sometimes says it's almost as if we're being used. That our passion is being used to promote a message that we're not entirely happy with.
Well, on that note, Ronnie, I mean, obviously you two can speak more than I can on this, but like,
Yeah.
is this not how, say, like Peter once began, where the boots on the ground, for the very most part, are animal rights people that get it, people that actually, understand and want to stand against this, but the people at the top who make the decisions and spend the money and allocate all of the crap are not that way, and as time goes on, that divide just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Because if the people at the top are the claims makers, it doesn't matter how many thousands of people you've got at the grassroots level that are abolitionists. Because they're still if they've got to stand on a stall in Newcastle, miles away from these people, and they've still got to use the same messaging, the same mantra, it's irrelevant of what their personal feelings are,
Yeah.
because they're still a welfare group. Like,
Yeah. And I think this is the thing. This is, there's like, I mean, it's obviously not called animal rebellion anymore, but it's like almost a rebellion within the ranks of them, where the grassroots aren't happy. The grassroots themselves that are taking part in the action aren't happy with the messaging.
yeah.
They want a clear animal liberationist pro-vegan message to come out of it, and that isn't what's coming out of it.
No, and I mean, obviously, the danger as well is just say, like, off the back of the horse racing stuff, the new people that are like, I like this animal rising, I want to follow them. They're not abolitionists for any part, and that you're going to have a group that slowly they become the minority, just like they are within the movement. And is this? I mean, this is why I just think is this not a repeat of all of these other groups that we've had in the past? Whereas, although the name is terrible, exposing cruelty seem to be doing it the other way round and realizing that actually grassroots is the only time that you've only got any grasp and any control over your message and what you want to do and the direction that you go in, and we have to maintain that at any cost. And I mean, I really like the fact that they're not looking for headlines. At the end of the day, if your activism or what you're doing is beneficial or successful enough, you'll get headlines naturally. You don't need to go seeking them and chasing them. If what you do makes a big enough difference, you'll get those headlines. You'll have newspapers chasing you.
But the
I,
thing is with
I,
headlines, though, it's you'll put an animal rights action on, you'll do something around the rights of animals, and it'll get spun to be welfare. You know what I mean? Like you could do, you could do anything and it hits the headlines, and then all they talk about is welfare. They'll talk about how the suppliers have moved away from that particular organization or whatever it is that's been exposed or whatever it is that you've done, and they just flip it back to welfare because at the end of the day, that's what the general majority want to know about is, oh, if I go and buy something from Tesco, I'm not going to contribute towards that. Oh no, don't worry, we've changed our supplier. Oh, that's good. It's like,
Yeah, it's a fault line in the movement, isn't it,
I mean,
Kev?
until the media relay the information and the story in the way that we need it to be relayed, I don't necessarily think that headlines are as helpful
I would agree.
to everyone. I mean, they're helpful because they get people talking, and then you can have a conversation with someone once so the conversation might come up at work when it wouldn't normally come up at work, and then someone like me can then have that conversation. But they're
When you
few
say
and far between.
headlines, you mean what appears in the media, you mean?
Yeah. So when you get like, I don't know, like the Guardian story about the expose that Joey Armstrong's eventually going to release, they were all just talking about welfare and treatment, um, and mistreatment rather than treatment. To be fair, misuse rather than use. So it's like, and then the caption that Joey put in there obviously was very woolly, I would say. I don't know if he put a bigger one in and they've just chose a sentence out of it or what, but you could see that the entire article was written to appease those who don't want to pay for cruelty but want to continue abusing, violating the rights of animals.
Well, I'm not so sure about the appease bit because I think it's just the dominant language
Yeah.
of the movement and also of the media, and so there's a some symbiosis there. So yeah, I'm not quite sure about whether there's some kind of tactical thing that they're doing here. I think it's just the fact that they're used to our movement talking in these kind of moderate welfare kind of terms, and so they just assume that that's the language that they can use and that would describe us. And of course they probably don't get much pushback from that anyway. I mean, the only kind of decent sentence in that Guardian piece was Joey's, 1.5 lines. But the problem is now is that it's being promoted all over the place on social media, this article, as though it's great. And of course it's not being said, well, we had this Guardian article, it's not very good. They're not kind of saying that, which is a bit of a shame.
I mean, it wouldn't have mattered what Joey said at the end of the day, because his one sentence got lost in amongst all the other stuff anyway. So it wouldn't have made any difference how good or how weak Joey's message was. I mean, it was actually, as Joey goes, it was a fairly decent message. It was just so much of other crap that the article had. And then the other side to that too is, the other sort of, I suppose, negative impact of the media is you've now got, off the back of that, obviously these articles that are coming out saying it's closing, and for a lot of activists it's like job done. So the media has put out this message of welfare, this place is closed, and for a lot of people now it's like, that's it then, we're finished, we've done whatever we needed to do, and that's it, job complete. And it's like, I mean, there's no guarantee of any victory here at the moment. There's no information that backs that up. Because they've already said they're relocating.
It's a tricky one, but I wonder whether we can kind of take this one at a time, in the sense that Ronnie, maybe we can go back to what Colleen is saying here about the dairy occupation. Maybe you can comment on that, and then we can move to Pilgrim, perhaps. Is that all right with everybody?
Yeah, there's kind of two things. There's first of all how the media report things, but there's secondly what is kind of conveyed to the media in the first place, in terms of the press release and in terms of what the kind of spokespeople for an organisation say. And the problem with Animal Rising is that it's what they actually put out to the media in the first place, because their press releases kind of are available. You can see what they've actually kind of put out, what they put on their social media, and there's a problem with that.
What Colleen's saying is unfocused and all over the place. Is that right?
Well, it's kind of, you see, it's kind of, yeah. I mean, what they've done recently kind of does seem to be sort of all over the place, because, like, the history of, like, because they were formerly Animal Rebellion, and the history of Animal Rebellion is that they were people within Extinction Rebellion who didn't like it that Extinction Rebellion weren't really saying anything about animal farming being a major contributor towards the climate crisis, and so they split away, kind of, try and kind of raise, raise public awareness. I think put pressure on the government in terms of the harm that animal farming does, to the climate, and that's where this idea of plant-based future arose from. And it was more or less like, kind of, we want the government to move the country towards a plant-based future, as if this government we've got would ever consider doing anything like that at all. I mean, it was like a kind of, really naive idea that this present government could be moved anywhere in that direction. But anyway, that seemed to be the idea of it. And they kind of, so the actions that they carried out, like they kind of did a occupation of, like a blockade of dairy distributors in mostly, like, it was really kind of the Midlands and the kind of south of England, that took place last September. And the actions themselves, like, were really, really good, generated a lot of publicity. But the messaging, in my view, left a lot to be desired, because there was really little or nothing said about the immediate victims of the dairy industry. The plight of the cows and the calves. That was hardly mentioned. It was all about the damage that animal farming causes to the climate, and we need to move towards a plant-based future to combat the climate crisis. And to me, that's the wrong way round. What you do is you talk about, the tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cows and calves that are the victims of dairy industry every year, that's what you talk about first, and you talk about what's wrong with that, and then you talk about the climate. Surely that's the way round it should be. It's like sort of kind of taking action against the slave trade, and then going on about how like the slave trade is bad for the economy, and not mentioning the plight of the slaves, which some people actually did in the campaign against the slave trade, believe it or not. It's kind of it's like that. The kind of the major problem with it, the most immediate problem with that, then they weren't saying anything about, and that was a really major difficulty I had with their messaging on that. And then what happened? All of a sudden, they go and rescue some beagles from MBR Acres, and what's that got to do with the climate? Nothing, you know. And then going on about and then this thing about we're a nation of animal lovers and everything that starts being brought in. So it seems to me that they kind of don't know what direction they want to go in. There's a disconnect with the kind of actions that are being taken, and a disconnect with the messaging. And to me, what I'd like to see, stick to animal farming and the fishing industry, right? And when you do the messaging, put out a clear vegan message, clear vegan animal liberationist message, right? That the number one problem with this is the plight of the farmed animals and the plight of the fishes. That's the number one problem, right? And what people need to do is go vegan. As in, because what they're putting out like these messages that get publicity, that are seen by large numbers of ordinary people, and they're not telling the ordinary people what the ordinary people can do as individuals to do something about it. So it's kind of wasted. It's a wasted opportunity. It's just this generalized thing about let's have a plant-based future. Well, ordinary people are going, yeah, but what do I do? What can I do as an individual? They're not telling anyone what they can do as an individual to kind of, change their, change their lives. And that's a kind of major problem like I have with them. Like the actions are good, but the messaging kind of leaves quite a lot to be desired. And I mean, Roger and I had one of our Still Alive shows. We spoke about that. Really, I think it was the one before last. And I think we're currently trying to fix up a show where there's a couple of people from Animal Rising. It's like going to be a special show where they're going to come on and talk to us about it, and we're going to have a conversation with them about it. So that has come out of it, and maybe perhaps they'll think a bit differently after they've spoken to us. I mean, I very much hope so.
Yeah, hopefully, sorry to interrupt, guys. We've had a request from James. If I remember, he's a consultant for agriculture. I can't remember his exact job title now. He's a very pleasant guy, but it's totally up to you whether we have a guest or not.
Well, I'm cool.
Yeah, I'm good for a guest to come on.
Yeah.
I just wanted to I was just replying to a comment actually in the comment section there, sorry. I was just gonna say there, Ronnie, I'd never really thought about when you do see stories come out and stuff, when you hear the headlines or you see the action and it it hits the mainstream. I never really thought on that actually there isn't any messaging anywhere at high end about even when people go on talk shows and stuff, like when Animal Rebellion shut down the dairy industry. No one was talking about what you can do to, to prevent this thing that everybody disagrees with from happening. I never really thought about that, to be fair. It makes total sense.
Yeah, because people will be watching that and think, isn't that awful? What's happening to these animals, but they're not told what they can do as individuals about it.
Yeah, no, they just get
Just
told
this
facts
general
and
thing
figures
that we
about
need
the.
plant-based futures. Well, how does that happen? People think, oh well, the government needs to bring that in, and in the meantime, I'll just carry on doing what I've always done because that's down to the government. And then that's never going to happen. Certainly not with this government or any foreseeable government from like political parties we've got at the moment. Yeah. So therefore, nothing happens because they've not said to ordinary people what they can do.
So, welcome to James. Now, James, be careful, because if you say anything controversial, Kevin will attack you with his vogue on poetry.
No worries, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, just to give you a quick heads up, James. Normally on this Saturday we just discuss vegan issues. So, like, you just have to bear in mind if some of the stuff you didn't know what we were talking about. Is there anything
Right,
specific you wanted to talk to us about?
yeah,
Or
I just had a few questions to be perfectly honest.
yeah, go for it.
One of my first questions was like, why, from each of you, why did you all turn vegan? What were like the reasons behind it? So I know it's animal welfare, but did anyone do it for like climate reasons or whatever?
So, can I jump on this?
Go for it.
So, I watched Game Changers originally, and I decided to change my diet because I'm selfish and I want to live forever. And I did some research off the back of watching Game Changers and found that there was a lot of truth in what was being said, which shocked us because I thought I knew quite a bit about nutrition. But I think the difference here is the term vegan and the term plant-based. So veganism isn't about welfare or climate. It's a little bit touches on it, but it's not the main focus. It all links in with it. But if someone says that they're vegan for the environment, they're not vegan, they're plant-based. Veganism is and always has been a movement for the liberation of animals that are, well, all animals, and the removal of oppression and rights violations of all animals, including the human animal as well. So I suppose there's obviously and this is the problem we've got within the movement, is that we muddy the waters with when you see. I mean, I don't even like the term vegan being on food products because it's not vegan. It's plant-based, but it's becoming a brand almost, if you will, and it's confusing people, as you kind of I suppose highlighted a little bit.
Yeah. Right, yeah, because there's just one thing I was just thinking about as well, like, because a lot of vegan food or plant-based food or whatever you want to say, a lot of it comes from like quite far away. Like, so you have strawberries, they're coming from Spain, and you got all sorts of different fruits and vegetables and whatever coming from all sorts of the world. So surely if they're going for they're doing like a plant-based diet for more climate reasons, surely it's not more like environmentally friendly.
It depends on what someone's consuming, because as long as it's not air freighted, it could come from anywhere in the world and be
Yeah,
less.
yeah. Can I jump in on this? There's an
What's right?
actual on the Vegan Society website. There's a footprint calculator for the carbon footprint of food, and it kind of because you see the main problem in terms of the climate doesn't come from transportation. It comes from the method of production of food. You see,
Right.
so although transport plays a part in
That's
contributing
it, yeah,
to,
'cause it does play quite a big part as well.
yeah, it plays a part. But you see, it's kind of how the food is produced, and according to that calculator, and the calculator isn't hasn't been produced by the Vegan Society. They've just got it on their site. It's actually been produced by a university's food group. So this is a group that's kind of not particularly kind of pro-vegan or anything like that. It's just like a kind of, it's a university's group.
Yeah.
And when you go on there, you find that like, that kind of vegan food suitable vegans that's been transported from the other side of the world actually has a lower carbon footprint than meat that's come from a farm just down the road. And the reason for that is because of the main problem with animal farming in terms of the climate is something called opportunity costs,
Right.
and that is because the vegan diet is so much more efficient in terms of in terms of feeding people, that if we didn't have animal farming, so much land could be rewilded, and therefore would draw carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, and therefore make a huge contribution towards combating the climate crisis. And
Yeah.
it's because we can't do that because of animal farming, because of the land it takes up. That's the problem with animal farming, and that is why it makes such a huge contribution towards the climate crisis.
Yeah. Well, another thing I had to add was I we grow wheat at our farm, and obviously technically that's all vegan and whatever you want to say, as long as it's got eggs in and whatever for bread and all that. But the problem is we have to spray pesticides and we have to shoot pigeons, we have to shoot mouses and everything pretty much. So is that still vegan, or is that just a bit hypocritical?
So essentially, I mean, obviously, we don't want that. I mean, we're not asking anyone to do that. I understand that crops have to be potentially protected, and until we're in a position or a world where we farm in a different way, I mean, just for example, there absolutely are other ways that are harm free. They just cost more money, right? So a big part of the problem really is just about it's more cost efficient to go around killing. It's not more cost efficient to put up sufficient fences or to use noise enhancers or any of these kind of things, because they all cost money. So a big part of what we're trying to change is how subsidies work, for example, so that you could get money instead of doing nothing with it for just leaving land. You could get money to put adequate fencing up or money to enhance these things, so you don't have to exterminate life, because it's not a necessity. Protecting crops is a necessity, but killing everyone around isn't, because there are ways that we can avoid it. It's just that they're more expensive. That's something that we can definitely solve, a money problem, but we can't solve it until we've got enough numbers to force change. But also going forward, there are various other ways that we could farm that would take sort of agriculture outside, out of the equation, and we could farm indoors, which would protect our plants and our crops from the vast majority of these animals. We would protect them from the insects, it would protect them from the birds, it would protect them from the mammals. So like all of these things, in fact, the pesticides business in the future potentially will go out of business. We won't need it. There won't be one.
Yeah.
There's no use for them.
The other thing is, if people are concerned about the numbers of these animals that are being killed in connection with crop production, then the thing that they should do is to go vegan, or at least adopt a vegan diet. And the reason for that is more crops are grown to feed non-vegans than are grown to feed vegans. And the reason for that is the huge amount of food that's grown to actually feed to farmed animals. And there was some research that's actually come from a government department a few years ago that came to the conclusion that of the land in the UK that's used for crops, if everyone in the UK adopted a vegan diet, we could actually feed ourselves on just 2/3 of that land. So in other words, if everyone went vegan, we'd actually need to grow fewer crops. So all these problems associated with the growing of crops would actually be diminished if people went vegan.
Right, yeah, I agree with that on like some kind of basis, but another thing with going back to the insects and all that is there's very little ways to actually stop them from eating the crops. Because at our farm we have like these sound things that scare off the pigeons, but after a while it doesn't do anything, because obviously they get used to it and whatever. So over a course of time, the only option is to eradicate them, really.
But don't more just come then? If the food source is still there and you shoot the pigeons, don't more pigeons come to take the place of the ones that you shot? Isn't that what happens?
Well,
Yeah, and I mean the other part of what I meant to say when I was doing my thing was obviously some of this land that we're not using to grow plants on as we move forward can be rewilded, so the pigeons can just go live somewhere else. Like the problem is now they haven't got anywhere else to live. Where they live is now farmland or house land or factories or car parks or golf courses.
Yeah, you see, I think this is a fundamental thing, and looking at it in a kind of a deeper level, it's humans that have occupied the spaces that previously where these other animals lived. We're the species that has, our impact on the planet in lots of different ways is far greater than it should be if we were going to be fair and just to the other animals that share this planet with us. Like our population is far too high. That in fact that the most worrying overpopulation although I think the human species is overpopulated, the most worrying overpopulation is that of farmed animals. Because if you look at the numbers of mammals in the world, and they've done the calculation. They've done this calculation by weight. That's how they've done it. That 60% of mammals in the world are farmed animals. 34% are humans. No, 36% are humans. Sorry,
I was going to say 4% are wild.
only 4% are actual wild mammals. That is the extent to which we've had this horrific impact on the planet through and through our own overpopulation, but to an even larger extent through animal farming. That we've that wildlife has been pretty much eradicated to make space for all these farmed animals, which we don't need to farm because we could all live perfectly adequately on a vegan diet. And
there is another aspect, isn't there, as well, Ronnie, which is that the old, I mean, this is a long-standing vegan argument, which is the fact that other animals, farmed animals, will all be fed tonight, whereas something like 25,000 children might die today of starvation-related issues. So we're in a situation where the global politics of the world has decided it's more important to feed cows than to feed human beings.
Yeah, and I mean, just to step in, sorry, to make it even worse, it's not even just feeding them, feeding them in abundance in order to get them as big as they can, as quickly as they can. I mean, to the fact where they force feed geese and things like overfeeding and then wasting what's not used. Yeah, it's not even like they're just having a square meal. They're being overfed. There's an abundance of food that's available for them.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons that people are starving as well isn't just to do with production of food. Obviously, we could feed massively more people if the world adopted a vegan diet, because
it's the politics, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's politics. It's to do with distribution, because of course, like the kind of food industry is making money out of animal products, whereas there's no money.
That brings us to capitalism, though, Ronnie, doesn't it?
It is to do with capitalism, yes, and to do with like distribution, and what kind of happens is that a lot of these people are starving because the land where they live is owned by other people who are using that land to grow cash crops.
Yeah, and their best land as well, not just using their land, but they're using their best land and leaving the subsistence farmers with the crappiest land in their own country.
And that's why that's imperialism. That is when that kind of happens, and so that's kind of why it's a problem of like I think there is enough food in the world to feed everyone. It's just to do with the way it's distributed because of the unfairness of the system, basically.
Ronnie, my sister, who went vegan around about the same time as me, she always said that we won't feed everybody because as soon as they're fed, they're going to want a share of the oil and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, this is it. It's a big part of it is more than just that, isn't it? It's about keeping them under control of the government or the regime too, keeping them weak, keeping them desperate.
The best way of keeping them under control is so they couldn't actually survive. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. On that, actually, there's a thing called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. People might have heard about it. So, basically, it's like it's a public health kind of metric, if you will. Stick it in Google. It's got a really good. You'll get loads of images pop up of what it actually is, but it's talking about the tiers of importance and how you need to fulfill one tier before you get to another. So let's say that security is tier 1 normally. So that's food, shelter, financial security to a point. So these people that are in starving countries, as soon as you fulfill their needs, then they go up to the next tier and then the next tier, and eventually, like you say, they end up wanting a bigger piece of the global e-commerce pie. I am going to have to jump off very shortly because I'm ordering a Chinese for
no worries. But yeah, of course, if your priority is to make sure that you've got food in your belly, and that's your priority every single day, or to find somewhere warm or dry to spend the night, then all of a sudden, if those boxes get ticked, your priorities change. Of course they do. You start thinking about, what
I
else
thought you were having to go at Kev there for a minute.
That. Thinking, oh my god, I'm only going to get a takeaway. It's a vegan one.
Yeah, but that's what
If
I mean.
your
So, like,
priority, Kev, is to
you know,
have
it does,
food in your
it will
belly, what's the
factor
matter
and
with you?
change your priorities, won't it? It will factor what you think about the world and what you can
Exactly.
potentially get out of it.
Exactly. Just before I do shoot, I wanted to address Roger's question. You ran about me poetry and stuff. So I'm working on doing a shared Google Drive where I'm going to have all of me poetry that's available to share, print, use yourself, use as just a digital copy to read out. And I am going to start to re-record quite a bit of what I've already had recorded because I want to do a version.
That's great news, Kev. Do you know Dominic Berry?
I don't.
Right. Well, he's a vegan poet and he's a performance poet, sometimes called a slam poet.
Oh,
You,
yes.
yeah, you ought to contact him because he'll be a great help to you.
Oh, fantastic. Do us a favor, Roger, because me potential ADHD will kick in here, and as soon as I stop talking, I'll forget his name. Could you just chuck it in the chat?
Yeah. Okay.
And
You mean right here? You mean, yeah?
no, on our chat on WhatsApp.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Right here.
Yeah, because I guarantee I'll literally get off this live and I'll be like, who was that again?
So I'll remind you if Roger forgets. I know his name.
I can also send you some clips that because he was a guest of Vegan Island twice, and he did some performance poets at my university and also Temple Bar Square in Dublin. It was absolutely brilliant stuff. I'll send you the links.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, thank you very much, Roger. Yeah, I'll touch base.
Yeah, I was gonna when my new mic came, I was gonna re-record some of my older poems and noticed that I haven't got the words for them. So it's a perfect excuse to rewrite some of them with better language anyway.
Well, I actually started doing that when I was looking at what I was going to read for the festival. I was looking at stuff and I was like, I wouldn't use those words anymore. And I've replaced some words and I've actually rewritten full lines of other things.
Yeah, I can imagine that. I can imagine I will be doing exactly the same thing. To be honest,
Yeah,
with some of them.
like the poem "Not Yours," and it's like not your mother, not your milk, not your cocoon, not your silk, not your words, but not my words, but your euphemisms to protect you from your speciesism. But further down, I didn't really have anything about rights and violations and like oppression. So I've actually got a new verse in there in the middle, which talks about rights. So yeah, it's like I've kind of
But do you
tweaking
not? I mean,
things.
do you not think just before you go that this kind of like echoes the point that I've made loads of times that when you kind of have this connection and realise that almost everything that you've said in the past, you want to correct it. This is
Well,
what frustrates me about some of these groups and some of these
well,
people. It's like, yeah, right, you've made the connection now and you've realised it, but you've got all this material that you've got no intention of changing that's circulating, getting millions and millions of views, which
yeah,
is still saying something that even you don't agree with anymore.
yeah. And I mean, to be fair, before
Actually, hang on a second. Kevin, just before you go, which is what Andy said. But did you kind of have a quiet, kind of diplomatic conversation with this cruelty group about the name?
I mentioned that it was misleading, if you will. I thought that it being called exposing cruelty, I was like, I had an assumption of what you guys would be like off the name. And you are very much not that. I said, which is refreshing, but I wasn't quite so bold as to say, I think your name is shit, mate, for want of a better term.
It's a shame,
Um,
to be honest. Although it's good that they're potentially like co-involved with Happy Vegan Clothing because hopefully they haven't
yeah,
paid too much. But it's a shame that they've already branded stuff because a name change would make such a big difference.
yeah,
But their
and they were,
reluctance now will be that they've got all these clothing things and all that sort of stuff that's already advertised with that name and
yeah,
the
and
festival, obviously.
they were giving away things like free stickers and stuff.
Yeah.
At the festival. So they've got all of this other stuff as well. But yeah, exposing cruelty. The thing is, I suppose, for those on the outside looking in, when you talk about cruelty, they'll go, "Oh, what's cruel? I don't like cruelty," because no one does, do they? You will go to anybody in the street and go, do you endorse cruelty towards animals that's avoidable? I go, no. But then you talk to them about actual vegan values and what we are about, and they're like, that's not the same because they don't necessarily link animal use with cruelty.
No.
And I still stand by the fact that you can use animals and do it in a non-cruel way.
Yeah,
But
it's like
it's so
we're kind of
fundamentally wrong.
talking a parallel language to them, and they don't get it.
Yeah, exactly that. Yeah, yeah. Um, but no, I kind of wanted to hone in a little bit harder on the name, and I think if the conversation had gone a different direction, I would have. But actually, as soon as I started talking to them, I was like, "You guys are really, really, really speaking my language here." I got invited down to their festival actually as well. They asked us to do some Mimi Pottery down there with them. Um, but they asked us that after I started talking to them
Thank
about
you, Joe.
their mission statement, and I started talking to them about
Well,
how I
there's your
feel about.
in then, Kev. You can just write a poem about how shite the word cruelty is.
I think I've already got one, to be honest with you. But there will be one coming. I mean, my poetry now. I think Andy's rubbing off on us a little bit. My poetry now seems to be naturally more towards vegans because that's who I'm becoming more frustrated with. It's like you you know you talk about being a vegan and you say that you are a vegan and you are absolutely against the obvious wrongs, um, but you don't really talk about or even understand some of the basic stuff. And I was in that window until about a year ago when I started kind of changing my mindset a little bit. And I was getting cornered in conversations around backyard eggs and stuff, and that because the only influences I really had at that time were like Earthling Ed and Joey Carpstrong, and the big names that I'm not taking anything away from them. But when someone goes, but if I do this and it's not cruel and they don't die and they blah 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 blah, is that still wrong? And I was like, well, it is, but I can't explain why. Like I didn't understand it myself fully, and I wanted to, which is kind of the reason why.
Yeah, but
Um,
could Carpstrong and Earthling Ed explain why?
well, possibly not, and that might be why I didn't really have much of an answer.
Mm.
I mean, Earthling Ed did a video about backyard eggs, which I thought was quite good, and it talked more about the capitalism of demand and supply, and how if we had a vegan world, but somebody started consuming eggs and then started sharing them with their neighbor, and then started taking a bit of money just for the upkeep of the animals, then eventually you create a farm again, which I thought was kind of it helped people understand. But
I
yeah,
think I
it's
think though what you've just said though is a key point. Like when we're sort of making these observations and sort of criticisms, so to speak, we're not doing it because we're trying to be dickheads. We're not trying to do it because we want to be some divided little sector of the movement. We're
Oh,
doing it
speak for
because
yourself,
not
Andy.
only does it improve the message of your claim, but like you don't get stuck in these routes. We're doing it to improve what you're doing. We're trying to help
yeah,
you. And
exactly that.
it's not just improving the message for those you're listening to, but it improves the situation for you too. You won't get stuck in these situations if you understand the fundamental wrong. Like you won't. So
That's a
like
different
this,
story, Andy,
I know
because
people take it personally, but it's not a personal thing. It's we're trying to improve the message.
and that's the thing though, we are incredibly open-minded. So if somebody brings up a point that we've never encountered or a new piece of information, we will be the first ones to go, "Wow, I didn't know that," and go and look into it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been someone that said that for years that like vegans are normally the most open-minded. That's the reason that we are where we are. But I see less and less evidence of this every single day. Actually, I get to the point where actually having a conversation with another vegan is more frustrating than having a conversation with a non-vegan.
Yeah, and I still stand by, when you see these kind of debates go online and stuff, the minute it becomes who won, you've failed for the animals because it shouldn't be who won. It should literally be a case of did you influence someone? Did you give them some information that they didn't know, that they didn't currently have? And do you think that you started to, lay seeds and open the mind slightly, even if it's just slightly? Um, and if it literally becomes yeah, but I won that argument, then you failed for the animals because you're not focusing on the difference that that person's choices could make for the animals. You're focusing on, I won the argument no matter what. And I'm seeing more and more and more of that in the culture of these online debates and stuff, and of the street debates that go online and stuff. We always want to see someone win. Actually, no, I want to see someone be enlightened. I
Yeah,
don't want to see
absolutely. I
someone
mean,
with a
on that note, I know we've said this about 6 times now, but before you do jump off, I mean, on that note, what's your opinion of the potential Joey versus Tristan Tate debate? Because That's all I envisage coming out of this. No one is going to learn anything apart from who can shout the loudest. Yeah, okay, it's going to get a lot of attention, but from who?
What's the point? Is my opinion on that. Who's Tristan Tate apart from just a
Clean just asked the same question. Beat you to it.
Tristan Tate is the brother of someone who's up on human trafficking charges. Why? Like what? Why? All you're gonna do, or it's a publicity stunt, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's
Yeah,
gonna get people
absolutely.
watching.
And I mean, sometimes these publicity stunts, obviously,
Yeah,
for
but you
getting
can't
like,
you can't blame him for his brother though. At the same
no,
time.
no.
Yeah, you can't, I suppose. Yeah, but I mean, but I don't know who Tristan Tate is, to be fair. Apart from knowing that his brother's a bit of an arsehole.
But basically a clone of his brother, but lesser known and lesser famous, but more or less the
Is he a
same.
bit of a
in
dickhead
terms-
as well then? Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
exactly.
basically in terms of views and everything else, yeah, more or less a carbon copy.
Oh
Yeah.
dear.
So what's the point? I suppose would be my take on that. I would
You'd
much.
rather hope that there's only one of them, wouldn't you?
Yeah, yeah.
He's actually, I mean, in his defence, a little bit, he is deemed as the more sensible of the two. If you want,
That's
if you
not
take
hard.
that as you
Well,
want.
that's real hard, isn't it? That's real
Yeah.
hard.
I think the word debate can be a problem because debate implies that
I totally agree, which is why, I mean, on that note, is why I
Yeah.
won't enter a debate with Reasonable Vegan, despite the fact he's asked 3 times now. Because as far as I'm concerned, a debate has to have some sort of conclusion, right? One of you is willing to change your viewpoint or your position based on the information presented. Otherwise, a debate is not a debate. And he's not. And so neither's Tristan Tate. He's not going to change his position, no matter what. If he did a PowerPoint presentation for 6 hours and 100% proved him wrong, his position will stay the same. Therefore, a waste of everybody's time.
But should a debate also not be mediated and have like almost like a referee in the middle, and also have agreements on things like time?
I don't know if it's true or not, but I did read that David Rams had offered to mediate, which I just think makes it even more laughable.
Oh my God! Oh, can you imagine the super chats?
I think there's value in the word discussion is
Yeah,
better,
yeah.
but
That's probably what I want to see more of,
yeah,
Ronnie. To be fair, I don't want to see arguments. I want to
yeah,
see people in converse.
but you can only really have a discussion with someone who's prepared to have a rational discussion, can't you?
Yeah,
Is
Exactly.
it not?
you don't need a chair for that, but you do for a
Yeah.
debate.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got a point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a conversation is just a case of. I mean, when I used to do a bit of grassroots, and I got this from sales, I used to try and get a what's it for someone, which is anything about them I can talk about other than the thing that I want to talk about. So they've got a smartwatch, they've got the latest phone in the hand, they've got a Swish pair of trainers on, they're with the family. Just I can go up and go, oh, what kind of what? I'm thinking about getting a new smartwatch, mate. What's that one? Oh, it's one of those ones. I always having a read up of those, yeah. How is it? Blah blah blah. Maybe 30 seconds break the ice. Do you know why we're here today? Then we talk about the reason why we're there, because it gets you into a conversation. Whereas if you go up to someone and go, I don't know, like, almost collar them on the street, people get the backs up and the barriers go up a little bit.
Yeah,
And
but Kev, that's a convoluted conversation that you've created, isn't it?
yeah,
Yeah, Ian, I did see that. I can't defend that, to be honest. I know that that's his style, but just there's certain things you just probably shouldn't do, and that's one of them. I don't want to give it a huge amount of attention, to be honest, because it's just typical Jack.
yeah.
Well, we're not back on Jack, are we?
Yeah, he's made a
Let's
couple
not
of
go there.
videos essentially pretending to be the policeman that shot those 2 dogs in London, with his usual style. They're not. I wouldn't recommend watching them.
Oh no! I've given up on him about sort of years ago, I think. Joanna's got an interesting comment about what do you think about this idea about people being racist, anti-LGBT, I plus fatphobic, ableist? They're not vegan, and I agree with that. But a lot of vegans don't, do they?
I can't really see. I mean, personally, I would say the vegans that don't agree with that don't understand veganism properly.
It's oppression at the end of the day, isn't it?
The other thing is it's kind of not consistent with anti-speciesism, because how can you rationally be anti-speciesist if you're racist or you're
Yeah,
ableist?
I agree. Yeah.
You can't, because
Yeah.
these are all these
I
are.
think the animals only people, Ronnie, would say that you can be because it's kind of stay in your lane stuff, isn't it?
But you see, you can't. Yeah, but the thing is, you can't put forward, because all these things are prejudice against and oppression of others, because those others are different. That's what that all of them amount to. That they're all from the same. They all come from the same place. So it's totally inconsistent to be anti-speciesist and to be racist. Those two things just don't fit together at all. They're direct opposites, aren't they? And that's kind of like another problem with these other prejudices, isn't it? That you can't be. How can you argue against speciesism when you're a racist? You can't, can you?
No, I would also argue that even if we went down the hypothetical, we've now got a vegan world. If that's your mindset that you're still okay with some oppression somewhere, eventually that will be a non-human animal.
Yeah.
Because that caveat, i.e., well, this is okay because these are my feelings or whatever, these are the circumstances, that will spread. It will never lessen. It'll be like welfare. People will just get more and more comfortable with which ones they can be speciesist to, and we'll have the same problem again. I just don't think it works. We can't have that revolution without ending speciesism. Like you can't just move from one to another. We're not ending anything. Because there's
Well,
no
it's not.
education, then is there? There's no understanding of what we're actually trying to achieve.
Yeah, if people that kind of are racist, and then they're concerned about the use of other animals, I'd say, well, what is the basis for your concern? Where does that come from?
It's usually
You know,
welfare, isn't it?
Well, this is
because
it. This
well,
is it. This is
well,
why, like, I mean, it all links together. This is why I don't understand why there is such the big cry out about these intersectionists and not the cry out about welfare. Because as far as I'm concerned, the intersectionality that people are so concerned about is just a symptom of the welfarism that's been allowed to completely take over this movement. Because if you were against use, you wouldn't still be racist. You'd understand that oppression is wrong, not cruelty. But I think a lot of these people that are anti-cruelty and anti-abuse, them are these people that are misanthropic. These are these people that are still racist. These are these animals only people because they've never looked at the fundamental wrong. So they haven't got it. And I honestly think this very small minority of intersectionals that everyone seems to worry about is just a direct symptom of the welfarism that everyone seems to ignore. See you later, Kev. Thank you.
take care.
But yeah, that's something that I've noticed all the time. There's loads of conversations. There's probably a debate right now somewhere on YouTube within the vegan community about intersectionality and the damage it causes. But I bet there's not one about welfarism. The people that talk about it are like ostracized or shunned or told that they're being divisive or whatever. Like, it's a much bigger problem than us three can fix, and yet it's not being addressed by most of these people. But I really do believe that the two things are directly linked. And the more that we have this welfarist dilution, the more that we'll get sort of animals only people, and the more that we'll get this dilution of the philosophy where it's like it's not about humans, it's about this, and there will be more compromises. I mean, if Animal Rising reconnect people with nature or whatever it is, that relationship with nature, and get animal lovers on board, that's precisely the line we're going to go down. It will just be an RSPCA Mark II with slightly more about them.
I think there's a danger of that. I think there's a danger of people thinking that from their current messaging, that it's kind of all about, we need to, the idea that we are a nation of animal lovers. I mean that's completely untrue. I mean, they're starting off with an untruth, and then kind of going on from that, and it's like, it's like a real problem, because it kind of, they'll do a good action, like that action at the dairy farm. It was a good action, and that could have been used to generate a lot of positive, positive publicity with the right messaging. But the messaging on that was better than some of their previous messaging, I thought. But it still wasn't. There was still a lot to be desired from it.
What was it though, Ronnie?
Yeah, I was going to say,
But
what was the messaging for that dairy protest? Was it still animal lovers?
yeah, that well, yeah, there was something about that. It kind of started off. It started off really. It wasn't so much like at one time. The total message from that would have been plant-based future, but it kind of wasn't. It was like opposition to the exploitation of other animals and the plight of the cows and the calves that did come into it. But
Ronnie, these people ought to just spend, a few hours on TikTok and hearing people going, "Oh, I like torturing animals. I want to do this to them. I'll eat that, and I'll stick a knife in that, and everything." And it blows this idea that we're a nation.
oh yes, where that comes from, and then that's like kind of just.
I think it goes back to what we started the show with. The people, for the most part, that have got the actual experience are the ones that are the boots on the ground. The people that are calling the shots, that are writing the flyers and the spiel that goes on the internet, they're not experienced in this regard. They've read stuff and they've watched documentaries and stuff, but I don't think they've got any hands-on experience, which is why they don't get it.
I think one of the problems arises from the fact that they came out of Extinction Rebellion.
Yeah.
See, because Extinction Rebellion is a human-centric organisation. It's fundamentally let's end the climate crisis because of
Yeah, but that doesn't make any sense, Ronnie, in the sense that you're saying the reason they came out of it was because of all that, and then they reproduced it again or something.
Well, the reason they came out of Extinction Rebellion was because they didn't think Extinction Rebellion were putting sufficient emphasis on animal farming as a driver of the climate crisis.
Oh, okay, I get you. So they've now included other farmed animals, but they're still thinking in terms of XR instead of anything else.
Well, they started off. You see, they started off with farmed animals. Started off their actions to start off with when they split from XR, which I think was in '98. I think was animal farming.
It was Smithfield Market, wasn't it?
Well, it was it was kind of animal products. It was Smithfield Market. They did a blockade of McDonald's distribution centres, and then they did a blockade last September of several dairy distribution depots. But the messaging was about the harm that animal farming was doing to the climate, and we need to move towards a plant-based future to kind of combat the climate crisis, to combat global heating.
Yeah, okay, but you just used the phrase we need to move towards a plant-based future or farming. You said so. Yes. Well, you do that by creating the demand for it. So it's down to the individual straight off.
Yeah, yes, it is. But you see, the thing is that kind of this idea of system change, not individual, is a mantra of Extinction Rebellion. You see,
which they haven't broke free of. You're saying.
Well, which they've kind of not broke free of, because that was carried over into, because a lot of the principles of animal rebellion were very similar to Extinction Rebellion. They had something about it, but it's kind of a confusing thing, because the first principle of animal rebellion was opposition to speciesism. You see, but then when they carry out their action and their messaging isn't talking about opposition to speciesism. It's talking about plant-based future. It's talking about it's a human-centric demand. We need a plant-based future.
Isn't this just evolution then, Ronnie? That they haven't had time to get themselves sorted out?
What's happened now that they've kind of rebranded really as Animal Rising? They've ditched some of the stuff that came over from Extinction Rebellion, because one of the reasons that they kind of changed the name was they wanted to kind of move further away, kind of from Extinction.
So what remains the problem? The thing about the plant-based treaty, or just the system thing?
Well, there's basically. I mean, there's several. I think several difficulties with their messaging. First of all, there's this thing that they brought in. This thing about Nation of Animal Lovers is something that's kind of come in with Animal Rights. Because you see, I think the idea with Animal Rising was to kind of move a bit more like, you know, or to include a bit more in that you know, the kind of concern for animals apart from.
Can you see, Ronnie? Can you see any positives whatsoever in this language about animal lovers?
No, I don't like it at all.
But they must, right? And so they must have some rationale behind it, right?
Well, it'd be interesting to see, and you know, if we have.
Well, one of the things that I would like to see as well. I mean, we're not going to get a chance to see it, but you know, like their sign up form, I'd be interested to see the difference in how many people said that they wanted to do the farm occupation versus just getting involved with some racing stuff. Because I mean, one of the things straight away that we haven't touched on that much that the animal lover thing could take you down is you'll get people that will connect with it in some degree and go, yeah, I do love horses. I'll go and, you know, do this to boycott the races. Cows, no, I don't give a shit about them. And that's it.
You may
That's
get
the end of them.
but like in reality,
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that.
The activists that get involved with them are vegans and are people that kind of believe in animal rights. Those are the people that they're getting involved in their actions to a very large extent. I mean, it's
so then in that case, then that only further goes against the animal lovers thing even having any effect, because the people that are joining up are the people that doesn't mean anything to for the most part.
Yeah. See, the reason people are joining up is because Animal Rising are giving those people an opportunity to take part in actions that those people want to take part in.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, give example, like Louise, she went on the dairy blockade. She said, she said to me, I'm not going on this. You know, she said, I am concerned about the effect of animal farming on the climate, but the reason I'm going on this dairy blockade is for the cows and for the calves. That's the reason I'm going on. And all the other people she spoke to that went on that had exactly the same view as her.
Yeah.
You see, so
which I, to be fair, that doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, yeah. I would imagine that a whole bunch of the people that would be up for doing something at the races that maybe are against horse racing are still consuming dairy and they've got no intention of going and doing that. That's why I don't really understand the language that they're using. They'd be better off just saying who wants to do something to change this and just leaving it at that.
I think in terms of Aintree, when they kind of, there were two aspects to the action they took at Aintree. One was a big demonstration outside the front, and the other one was that some people tried to get onto the racecourse. Right now, out of the people that took part in the demonstration at the front, I would say that there probably were quite a number of those people that weren't vegan, because I know there were local people that were saying, I've always hated this. I've always hated the Grand National. I live fairly nearby. I've always hated the fact that horses get killed and injured, and I'm going to come along and join your protest. So those people were just there for the horses, and so those people wouldn't have been vegan. I think the activists, the more hardcore activists that kind of actually took part into trying to get on the course, I would say that all of them would have been vegan, because they were like the kind of more hardcore existing activists that probably carried over from, like the dairy blockades and stuff like that. Because when they did the dairy blockade, they put out a call for calling all vegans. It was calling all vegans. It wasn't calling all environmentalists. It was calling all vegans, because they knew that the only people that would be prepared to take part in the dairy blockade would be vegans. Yeah. Because if someone's just an ordinary environmentalist and they're not a vegan, they wouldn't be getting involved with Animal Rebellion. They'd be getting involved with Extinction Rebellion, Just Stop War, or one of these other groups.
Ronnie, didn't you say that another kind of indication of the kind of divide between what you might call the hierarchy and the grassroots was some of the chanting at the
yeah. What happened was, of course, they organised a a demonstration outside the Grand National. Now, there are demonstrations every year outside the Grand National by people opposed to horse racing, and I think Animal Aid generally
Yeah,
used.
just like the same as there was pretty much every single time there was a night on at the Greyhound track, right? It was just odd times would get the attention of the news cameras and everything else. There was almost always protesters there every time.
I think with the various greyhound around the country, some have demonstrations outside them, and kind of some don't. Um, but the greyhound racing is rather different because that takes place very frequently. Like a drug track will have 2 or 3 nights a week, whereas the Grand National is like once a year occasion. And there'd always be I think Animal Aid always organised a demo there, but it like obviously a fairly small demo, and there'd be like a hardcore of people that would maybe go to that every year. But what happened was that Animal Rebellion said, right, we want loads of people to come on this demo, right? You see, so people were going on that demo that weren't connected with Animal Rebellion stroke Animal Rising, you see. So you had people there, and there was some ill feeling really, because there were people there like seasoned, what you might call seasoned animal rights campaigners, who had, and many of whom had attended previous demonstrations outside Aintree, who were chanting "You bet they die," you see, and the Animal Rebellion people told them to be quiet because they wanted to have a like silent protest, and those people said, why are you telling us to be quiet? We've been coming here. You've only just, you're just whippersnappers new on the scene. We've been coming here every year. We're not swearing, we're not being abusive, we're just chanting "You bet they die." How come you suddenly kind of own this space?
It's a very clever slogan, that, isn't it? You bet they
Yeah,
die.
yeah,
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 absolutely. I really like that message. It's.
yeah.
So I can't understand that at all. I mean, even if that's your position, like we're going there to do a silent protest, that's who we are. Then all you do is just say, look, they're a different group. We're going to maintain what we've said. We're still going to, do a silent protest. Why have you
Well,
got to
that's to
stop
do with
everyone
the
else doing
ownership
something
of
else?
demos and stuff, that is, Andy. Andy, this is right up your street. Tiny T is talking about not a lot of land, especially up north. It's grim up north, is unsuitable for growing crops.
I know. I mean,
Uh,
I quite often say up north sounds like the perfect place to test some vertical farms, right? Because it's already a problem now. So the perfect time to just start developing these things, get ahead of the market.
Yeah,
Be
yeah.
one
Well,
of the first
just
people.
to do a bit of kind of background work with Tiny T. We've spoken to farmers before, Tiny T, and they were very resistant to the idea of vertical farming at first. And then when we talked about subsidies and the idea that, all this kind of stuff would be paid for and all that, they came round to it. So maybe you'll be the same. So the idea is that the land isn't the problem because of vertical farming. I mean, so long as you can actually have a structure on your land, then
Yeah, and I
bingo.
mean the even better part about it is potentially you haven't even got to build anything, have you? I mean, so let's just take the hypothetical that this land up north is so terrible that we couldn't even build on it. It's
It's
just like
grim up
literally
north for you,
hills and
Andy. It's
blocks.
grim up north. There's a KLF song called that, isn't there?
So let's just say we can't physically build on this land at all. So well, that's okay. We'll make use of all the empty factories or the empty units and all the. That's the great thing about vertical farming. You can kind of shove it anywhere.
You shouldn't try and farm on a bog, I think, is the question, isn't it? But
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised to be perfectly honest that
see,
this hasn't been pushed more than it has in those kind of places where arable farming already is kind of impossible.
yeah. The thing is that if I suspect this is to do with land that's used for grazing. You see, in other words, we can't grow crops on this land, so we're going to graze animals on this land.
Yeah,
I suspect us to do this. Yeah, but there is something that would grow on that land, and that's trees.
yeah,
yeah,
And the only reason there's no trees
trees
is
grow everywhere.
because
yeah.
animals.
No, hemp is another great source of
And
oxygen
we
too.
desperately need far more trees to combat the climate crisis because they
Yeah,
pull carbon.
absolutely.
And the thing is, as I said previously in the discussion, right, according to some government research a few years ago, that we could feed ourselves on 2/3 of the land used in this country for crops, right? If everyone adopted a vegan diet, we wouldn't need any land for grazing at all. So the huge areas of land used for grazing could be rewilded, could go back to forest. But if you leave a piece of land for long enough, trees will grow because they're the kind of they're the sort of base ecosystem. In other words, trees will in the end kind of take over everything, right? And that's what we want because
Yeah, and weird thing is, nut trees are some of the hardiest as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
and nut trees. So that's so we don't need that pasture land to feed ourselves. We don't need it to feed ourselves at all, and it's and it's massively inefficient in terms. Now, if you take like say sheep farming, and often this is an argument for sheep farming. Now on these uplands, crops won't grow, so we're going to have sheep farming, right? Now there's a few things about that. First of all, if sheep didn't graze that land, it would be forest, right? And one of the major things that forest would do would be prevent flooding because you get high rainfall, and because that land's all been grazed by sheep, that the water torrents off that and runs downstream, and it actually causes more harm to agricultural land downstream than the food that's gained from the sheep. So the sheep farming is actually a net loss to food production.
Yeah, it's kind of a holistic view rather than this simple.
Yeah. That's, apart from the exploitation and persecution of the sheep that are kind of killed, that aren't native to this country. Sheep come from the Near East. Sheep are used to being on like rocky mountainside type of land. That's where they originated, like similar to goats. That's where they're from. They're not originally native to this country. So the rich pastures that sheep are kept on are like totally not their natural environment. And the sheep have been over here for hundreds of years, but that's only a blink in evolutionary time. And so this is why they suffer all sorts of problems. They get foot rot and different things like that. As I said, I said before on a program that once we were in Wales and there'd been a really heavy rainstorm one night, and the next day as we were kind of driving along the road, there was really a large number of sheep dead in the fields because they hadn't been able to cope with this kind of heavy rain that had fallen, because that's not their natural, that's not what they've evolved to kind of, it's not the type of habitat they've evolved to kind of live in. So this idea that sheep it's natural to sheep in fields and all that, that's nonsense. They're not from here.
And also, they're probably being weighed down by the unnatural of wool on their backs.
They've been selectively bred to kind of, to obviously for the production of meat and the production of wool, as like all farmed animals have. This is why you get cows with massive udders and stuff. They're not meant to be. Their kind of wild ancestors didn't have that. They've been selectively bred so that humans could get more milk out of them. And this is the thing people need to realise. This isn't the natural, isn't it? That the countryside isn't that. What is natural? Going back to how things were, is woodlands. Most of this country, as indeed, very, very large parts of the world, were forest. And that it's because those forests have been destroyed by humans to a very large extent for animal agriculture.
Ronnie, you'd almost believe that nature knew what it was doing before we came along and destroyed half of it.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. But what's really shocking is that the majority of the large forests in Europe had already been decimated by the Middle Ages, and that is the kind of when the population of this country was 300,000. And that is an indication of the devastating effect of humanity on the world. That we'd already done that through chopping down trees for houses, for boat building, for fuel, and for all those things.
And probably weaponry as well.
It's weaponry, yeah. So this isn't.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just think how many trees they had to cut down for, like, say, a trebuchet or something like that. Or some sort of battering ram that would usually get burnt within a few minutes of being made.
We're such a violent species when you think about it.
Yeah, we are. But this is the point I was trying to make. It's not just like the last a couple of 100 years or whatever since we've had industrialized farming, that we've been this way. We've been putting time and effort and money and resources into creating ways to murder more efficiently for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Can you imagine if we just had 100 of doing the opposite, of trying to find ways to live in harmony, in ways to find peace, in ways to respect one another? Just 100 versus the tens of thousands of years of barbarity and what we could possibly achieve. This is the most frustrating part about it. The amount of times when people say it wouldn't work. How do you know? We've never tried, ever. We've never been civilized. We've never tried these things, and yet we write them off all the time. Yet what we do know doesn't work. What we're doing right now, we're unwilling to change.
Yeah, I think the thing is that it's kind of, we kind of can't go back and sort of kind of undo stuff. But what we can do is move forward in the right sort of way, and in doing that, we can use technologies to kind of help us do that. And like Andy was talking about vertical farming. Now there is technology that's been mentioned by George Monbiot in his latest book, Regenesis, which is called bacterial fermentation. And that's the use of bacteria to produce protein foods, and also fats and oils, which is a large part of like the human diet. Those two constituents, and these can be produced by bacterial fermentation in like vats, huge vats. And people go, "Oh, bacteria, that's horrible," but we're covered in bacteria. We have loads of bacteria.
That's horrible. Whilst eating a burger, it's probably covered in feces.
Well, we couldn't live without bacteria, but I think it all comes back to Tom Reagan's idea about we need people with goodwill to come together.
Yeah, absolutely that. Yeah,
and I mean, but the people of goodwill have got to not have the exploitation mindset. That's the thing.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, so you've got vertical farming and you've got George Monbiot's method. So there's straight away two that already exist right now without really putting any time or money or effort or anything. I mean, to take the example, I know it's like terrible, but like you look at what the Americans did with like Operation Paperclip and stuff, where they rounded up the best or the worst, however you want to look at it, of like the Nazis and took them over because they're like, they're bad people, but they're brilliant minds. So we're going to just, we want to make use of that instead. Well, kind of we can do the same thing, but we are actually like changing their minds at the same time. We're not just like rinsing that information. We're actually changing who they are too, and they're being part of it and want to make the world a better place and want to live in peace and harmony. Like that's the key difference. This information, for the most part, exists all over the place. It does already. Yeah. We just need to connect the dots and move in that direction. But that takes numbers.
Absolutely, and there are examples. Another thing that, because a very important component in all this, and in is of course the soil, and which is like a living ecosystem, very complicated living ecosystem in itself, and like. It's something we've destroyed. The types of farming that humans have been doing have kind of caused huge damage to the soil and its kind of capability of producing food and producing healthy food. And so, this maintenance of like, healthy soil is massively important. And there's another thing that George Monbiot talks about in his book. There's a farm called Tolhurst Farm, which I think is kind of sort of Oxford Reading area, and it's a veganic farm. And the guy there farms, and it's the land he farms on is not high quality land. It's quite low quality land, but it doesn't use pesticides. It doesn't use weed killers, and it doesn't use animal manure. It doesn't use artificial fertilizers, and because of methods he uses to maintain like the proper integrity of the soil. He manages to produce really good yields of crops, and it's a brilliant example to like other farmers for what they could do with their land.
Yeah, but Ronnie, the orthodox understanding is that's impossible, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's not. He's proved it's not impossible. This guy's proved on his farm that it's not.
I mean, we kind of know it's possible anyway, because before, say, like, I don't know when pesticides and insecticides were invented, but it would have been in recent times. So say 10,000 years ago when this started being a thing, they definitely weren't using them then, and they managed just fine. So it was always possible. It just wasn't as efficient. That's something we
Well, yeah,
forgot.
but that's when people say, yeah, that was when people were kind of not very well nourished, whereas we are now. That's what they're saying, wasn't it?
Well, I think it's to do
I'd
with
ask you to provide some evidence of that.
what,
But
what,
yeah, I
what,
know what you're saying.
what's happened is it's like this thinking of the immediate rather than long term is like stuff's been pumped into the soil to produce immediate yield, but the long term effects on the soil have been ignored. So you get good yields for a short while, and then the soil becomes degraded, and that's then the yields then suffer. You see, because you haven't looked at the long term kind of maintenance of it, and that tends to be something that's like really common to humans. Just looking at the short term rather than taking a more long term view of stuff. And that's kind of what's sort of happened in a sense with kind of agriculture. Really, that it's done in an unsustainable way.
Yeah. Hi, David, by the way. Sorry you haven't been able to get a word in edgeways since we joined us.
Hey guys, how are you?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. Hey. And I just wanted to comment on a few things that I heard that I disagree with. Basically, that misanthropes are the ones that are on the welfarist side or something like that. I
No,
think
I don't think they're on
Andy
the
said
welfare
it.
side. I think this intersectionality that like you would refer to is potentially a symptom of this welfarist ideal, because these are people that haven't made the connection with oppression. They're still anti-cruelty for the most part, which is why they feel the way they do about other forms of oppression. I think it's a
Yeah,
symptom of
but
it, and I think the actual problem is the welfare issue.
yeah, but I I disagree also with that, because you can be opposed to racism and maybe be a sexist. Is that right?
So say it again.
Or
I don't know. I
that,
mean,
like you can
no,
you can
yeah,
oppose
well, I mean,
ra-
plenty of people are. Is it right? No, obviously, there's still it's still wrong, but they're not grasping that. They haven't unlocked speciesism, have they?
yeah.
They've just kind of said that it's only wrong in these areas. It's not wrong in this particular area that I already have this opinion about.
You can do that, but
Hmm.
it's not consistent.
Hmm.
It's not
Exactly,
consistent.
and most, yeah, exactly, Ronnie. So most people are not consistent with everything. Like, and we are demanding from vegans that they are consistent with everything that they engage in, or like they have to be like the role models of society, and I think that's detrimental to the movement, because some people might still be I don't know, ableist or elitist, whatever. But the fact that they care about animals and they see like the intrinsic value on animals is valuable to the movement. It's like the feminist movement is not gatekeeping all the feminists that are not 100% anti-oppression, and that's why they have bigger numbers than or at least they go out and protest in bigger numbers than the animal rights movement.
Yeah, so within but they would have, so within the feminism movement, they may have people that are racist, for example. I would agree with that. There are other forms of oppression, but
Yeah.
you've got to agree with
Yeah.
the feminist principles still. And I mean, for me personally, I don't think that you can be oppressive in any other form, whether that's racist, homophobic, ableist, whatever, and be vegan. I think this is why, like, the whole intersectional thing, it's an awkward subject, because as far as I'm concerned, by saying I'm vegan, that's all of those other questions answered. It's, I'm against oppression. It's across the board. I don't need to be specific. Whereas if we start having vegans that are also racist, I'm going to start needing to be specific about the oppression that I'm actually against, because veganism no longer covers oppression. It covers some oppression. That's the concern.
Yeah, but the problem is that now we have all animal rights platforms concerned with human issues that don't have anything to do with animals at all, and animal rights conferences that are full of intersectionals or well, pro-intersectionals or people that call themselves intersectionals, who are there to talk about their own oppression. They are not there to talk about animals. So
But do you not
that's the
also
problem that I
think that
see.
potentially those who have been oppressed or those who empathise with oppression because it's their environment or whatever are actually far more likely to make the connection than those not? So although you're not wrong in what you're
In,
saying, there's always that connection to be made within those groups because they get it already. It's just speciesism that you're dealing with. It's not like they don't care.
in my personal experience, that it's the opposite, because whenever you talk to people who are in the, for example, in the feminist movement, if you talk about the oppression that female pigs, for example, are subjected to, and they completely ignore what you're saying, because and they even get offended and they say, are you comparing us with pigs, blah blah blah. It's in my experience, it's the opposite. It's like you would expect that they understand what you're talking about because they know about oppression, but
There's lots of
it's
feminist-inspired vegans, like eco-feminists, right?
Yeah, and I mean, literally, that example that we're
I
talking about, that's still the speciesism that's answering that question. Are you comparing us to pigs? So I mean, we've got to accept that that's still an issue. They're against a form of oppression, whatever it is that you're meeting them at the rally or whatever. But they're still speciesist. So we still need to make that connection. We still need to educate them. I mean, it's not going to happen just as a click of the
yeah,
fingers. It's just usually you'd expect it to be easier long term. Like if you look at it as 100 clicks thing, you'd think people that already understand and empathize with oppression maybe only need 50 clicks.
yeah, but I don't think that we should target movements, specific movements. I think we should just send our message and see who can join in, who can agree with us, and who can see the inherent value on in animals, like in non-human animals. That's what I think it like works best in my experience. I have tried it. Like I have tried that so many times. Well, if somebody's talking about racism, and you raise the subject that, well, what we do to the animals is very comparable to what certain groups of humans have gone through, because they are considered different, and they just shut down completely. It's like no, that's another thing, that's another subject. Like we are humans. Well, it's in my personal experience, years talking to to people about the subject, it's not very, like, yeah, like we can expect certain people to relate to what we're talking about, and in practice they don't.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, nobody can argue with your personal experience on it. I mean, I do think, as I commented on George's post about this a couple of weeks ago, I think a lot of this also is down to algorithms and our circles, because I don't see this kind of thing as much as what others clearly do. But I also think that's got a lot to do with the kind of thing that you interact with versus what I interact with, which is probably why I see so much welfare shit now, because I comment on it all the time, and so it gets me more.
Yeah,
So because I'm
yeah,
not
but I
seeing
think,
it. I'm not like anywhere near as often as like you and Cliff, for example, talk about it. I don't see it, but it could just be like this circle stroke algorithm thing, and you're seeing it because that's the content that you're interacting with and responding to, and I'm not. Because
Yeah, well,
I really personally, I think it is, whether it's only a subtle symptom, I do see it as a symptom of just this kind of
Yeah,
welfare regime that's come in, which it just
yeah.
dilutes the definition so much that people are against just the cruelty part of it. They don't even realise any of that it is about oppression. They certainly don't extend that because they don't see racism as cruel. They don't see sexism as cruel. So those don't fit in the same bracket.
yeah, and
Can I just
Yeah, jump
uh,
in.
there's a chap in the chat. It was a farmer saying, "I love my animals," but how can someone correlate loving their animals when they send their animals off to slaughter, and when that's totally unnecessary because we don't have to kill any animals to feed ourselves? So how is that anything to do with love? It's just I don't understand this when farmers say they love their animals. How can you love an animal and then send that animal to slaughter at only a fraction of that animal's natural life? It's just it doesn't correlate at all, does it?
No, not really. But I mean, even if potentially that somehow was your consistent view and definition of the word love, you're not against the injustice that you put into
Ah,
it.
no, we've got crop deaths now. We've got crop deaths. We're not going to talk about crop deaths. In fact, people
So you've
that
got no respect for
yeah,
them, even if you quote unquote love your animals, you've got zero respect for them. You've got zero respect
yeah,
for their existence.
yeah. Let me just talk about crop deaths.
but
We're talking about crop deaths now, which is kind of surprise. But the point is, people, if he's really concerned about crop deaths and the number of animals that are killed in the harvesting of crops, what needs to remember is that people that consume animal products are more responsible for crop deaths than vegans. So if you're concerned about crop deaths and you don't like the idea of crop deaths, become vegan or consume a vegan diet. The reason is because so many crops are grown to feed animals that are raised for food, that more crops are actually grown to feed people who consume animal products than they are grown to feed vegans. So if you're really concerned about crop deaths, the first thing to do is to stop consuming animal products and become a vegan, because we actually directly or indirectly consume fewer crops than people that consume animal products. And like I stated earlier in the chat, that we could feed the whole of the UK on 2/3 of the land that we currently use for growing crops, because so many crops are fed to farms.
Yeah, Ronnie, I think on a kind of commonsensical level, it's counterintuitive for people to understand that meat eaters consume more crops than vegans do. It kind of
Yes.
doesn't make sense on a commonsensical level, does it?
No.
No, but it's actually true, because what they need to remember is that so many crops that kind of that so many crops are grown to feed farmed animals. If you take, and this is comes from some research from a government department just a few years ago, that in actual fact we could feed the whole of this country on 2/3 of the land we currently use for crops if everyone adopted a vegan diet. So we'd be growing fewer crops, and so if you grow fewer crops, there are fewer crop deaths. So anyone concerned about crop deaths doesn't like the idea of crop deaths. The first thing they should do is adopt a vegan diet.
Okay, Ronnie. So Tristan says, but if we all went vegan or plant-based, in a sense, this doesn't actually need people to go vegan. It needs people to go plant-based, right?
Plant-based, yeah,
We still have crop death.
yeah,
We already covered that.
if you're concerned about
Rewind.
crop, if you're concerned about crop deaths and you don't like crop deaths, then if you want to reduce the number of crop deaths, then go vegan. If you really do care about those animals that are killed.
But you're not answering that question, Ronnie. He's saying that if everybody goes plant-based, there would still be crop deaths.
yeah, I think the answer is that veganism doesn't pretend to be harmless. It doesn't pretend that humans are harmless at all. Veganism only pretends that humans stop exploiting other animals for their own benefit.
Yeah, and plus, like we've never tried a different way of farming either.
Yeah,
So, like we've only ever done the same thing. We already have ways that we've mentioned on this live already that can
and the other
reduce
Yeah,
thing,
well,
emissions.
I'd say to David that the section of the population who seeks to become harmless would be vegans. You'd agree with that, right? It's not as though
Yeah, kind
veganism
of.
is.
Yeah, kind of. Because I think that's more of an argument of the utilitarians that try to reduce suffering to the maximum. Like, and I don't like that argument at all, because we are realistic. We are people who think that we have moral obligations, not that we should live up to the all the moral virtues that we can think of as humans. So we have the moral obligation of not exploiting other sentient beings, but to try to reduce the suffering of the world to zero would be a moral virtue, in my opinion.
yeah, you can't reduce the suffering of the world to zero, but what you can do is decide that the amount of impact we have at the moment is far greater than what is fair and just in terms of the other animals that share the planet with us. And that doesn't mean we have no impact. It's
Yeah,
impossible for us to have no impact because otherwise we wouldn't exist. Now we have a place. We've evolved alongside other animals. There is a place for us on the planet, but it's possible to maintain that position and still argue that we've exceeded the impact we create is far more excessive than what is fair and just towards the other animals. It is possible to kind of hold that position, and that isn't. I don't believe that's inconsistent with veganism. But you see, regarding crop deaths, see the reason crop deaths occur is because of mechanised farming. Right now, if far more people worked on the land and we could reduce mechanised farming, we would reduce crop deaths and we might be able to reduce them totally to zero. And I think it would be great if more people worked on the land. Most jobs that people do are totally meaningless. They actually harm the planet. So I think if we return to a more agrarian society, it would be a benefit to everyone. It would benefit to humans and benefit to animals. Then it would massively reduce crop deaths because we.
yeah, yeah. I agree with you.
No, that was a vegan farting.
Yeah.
Then,
I was going to say I couldn't work out if that was a train or a huge boat.
Jennifer is saying, get the farmer on as a guest. I don't know if the farmer is asking to be a guest or
They
not.
can't. I already checked. They can't come on there. I haven't got enough followers.
Oh, okay.
But you see, this is a common. This is a common argument. The crop deaths argument is kind of like what is very frequently. It's this argument like because you can't because we can't because we can't live. It's not possible for us to live on Earth
Yeah,
without
it's
causing.
Nirvana fallacy. Basically, you can't do something
Yeah,
perfectly,
because
so it's not
because
Yeah.
worth doing at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
because
And
you can't live
it's
without.
absolutely, and the silly thing
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
we're making these assumptions without no. I mean, for all we know, in 50 years' time, with 50% say of the world being vegans, that's 50% of science, 50% of agriculture, 50% of politics. All of these industries now massively changing and working in a completely different direction, literally the polar opposite of the direction they've always worked in. For all we know, they could come up with a method that was 100% harm-free, but we're never going to get there if people won't even try.
Yes, you see, that's the thing that we the fact because we can't because we cannot live on the earth without impact doesn't mean that any amount of impact is okay. Doesn't mean we can go and just destroy everything because it's
Hmm.
impossible to destroy anything, and that's a ridiculous
Yeah.
argument to make. That is what
Yeah.
people are trying to do.
Yes, but Ronnie, I think my point is that yeah, we should strive to be less harmful. That we should try to come up with ideas to eliminate all these crop deaths. But that is not a vegan issue.
Well,
That is.
if veganism is just regarded solely as opposition to exploitation, right, then that's not a vegan issue because crop deaths aren't technically exploitation. But you see, neither is say I'm driving along in my car, and like the example I gave in the chat we had, and a rabbit runs out in front of me. Right? If I
Yeah.
decide to run over the rabbit, that isn't a vegan issue either, because I'm not exploiting the rabbit. I'm just not caring about the rabbit. It's not
Yeah,
a vegan.
but I mean, the thing
But
is,
Yeah, but
even if you didn't see the insects or any of the animals
yeah,
that are killed in crop deaths as like a rights violation or whatever, they're humans for the most part that are involved in the production, the sale, the transportation, the picking, the packing. They most certainly, for the most part, usually are. So, like, we'd still be looking to ways to change these systems
yeah,
going
yeah, yeah.
forward.
But what I'm saying
Yeah.
is if these things, I mean, some people would say that being concerned about crop deaths is a vegan issue. Other people say it's not. But even if it's not, it comes from the same place that veganism comes from. Like, it would be inconceivable to imagine that a vegan wouldn't be concerned about that. And so if they're not, if the reason that they're concerned about that doesn't lie within veganism, then it must lie within the place that their veganism comes from, mustn't it?
Yeah, but for example, with your example of the rabbit, if a vegan respects animals enough to stop exploiting them directly, I don't think the vegan is going to run over the rabbit.
Yeah. No, that's right.
It's
That's why
implicit.
it comes from
Yeah,
the
yeah,
same
that's it.
place.
I mean, with
Comes
the
from
more
the same place.
people that are turning vegan, the more you're going to influence changes because it's the natural mentality of everybody.
Yeah,
It's not
but if
something
we
you have
as
to, once those people are vegan, their positions will change because their mentality and their viewpoint and their whole perception on life has changed. They won't want to do the
yeah.
things, they won't want to sign the contracts, they won't want to, do the things that they've used to do because they would have changed as a person. That's the difference about the direction. Like, we've never had that before. We've only ever had barbarity and exploitation.
Yeah,
Yeah,
one
but
weird example of that is that if you go through a wooded area on a motorway or a road that's been cut through, and you've got all these signs which say deer, does anybody slow down? No, right?
Well, I mean, I do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for the most part, no, of course they don't. Most people probably just see those signs as an inconvenience. Like, there's a possibility that their travel could be delayed.
But it's the road that crosses the forest. It's not the deer that's crossing the road. We
Yeah,
forget that
absolutely.
we drove those roads as an imperialistic species. We drove those roads through the territories of other animals. They were there first.
Yeah, but
We
Ronnie, you see, you're expecting a level of humility that humanity doesn't have as yet, but
as yet, no,
a vegan
yeah,
humanity would have that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
yeah,
that's a great
and
example, isn't it? Like, if there was, say, 50% vegans again, the people that were in charge of the motorway agency and all that kind of stuff, then things like road bridges would be the thing that they would be looking at. It's not
yeah.
like, nature and other I don't like calling them wild animals because it makes out that, like, they're ours to tame, but like other animals that they'd be considered. Those sorts of things, they're easy enough to do. They already exist in the world. This isn't new technology we've got to invent. It's just money that's not being spent.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
but
Which is why the kind of fundamental sort of solution is educate people to become vegan, isn't it? Because once we have more vegans, then we'll be more in a position to do something about all these things.
Yeah.
yeah, I also wanted to say if that if we assume that crop deaths is a vegan issue, then it would be like feminists assuming that whatever they consume, whatever, like a cell phone, if it involves the exploitation or harm to another woman, then that's not feminist. Like it wouldn't be feminist to buy an iPhone or whatever other product. Then we are just shooting ourselves in the foot by assuming that crop deaths are a vegan issue.
But I think they're an animal liberation issue, aren't they? In the sense that this is a form.
Depends.
Well, since the
Well, it's a form
veganism is
of
animal
oppression.
liberation, it's then
Depends
therefore
what you mean.
Yeah, it's a form of oppression of other animals that we could actually do something
But, but
to reduce our impact on other animals, and therefore It's if we consider that our harmful impact on other animals is at present too great, right? Then
but
something to do. We need to reduce that, and that's an animal liberation issue. Whether or not,
Ronnie, sorry,
you see, the thing,
sorry, just
it's just that if you think that obviously, we're going to have some impact on the planet. But if we consider that the impact we currently have is far in excess of what is fair and just in terms of other animals, then we need to do something to reduce that impact all across the board. How far we reduce that impact is a question for discussion, but we can all agree that we do need to reduce it.
Yeah, but that's not a vegan issue. That's because then having a child would be a vegan issue. And I'm an antinatalist. I am, but I don't mix those issues. I don't mix veganism with antinatalism. I know that it is not help. It is not going to help animals at all if I mix those things together.
Human overpopulation is an animal liberation. If our population is at a level that is unfair and unjust to the other animals that share our planet with us, then that becomes an animal liberation issue, doesn't it? Whether or not it's another question, it's definitely an animal liberation issue, isn't it? Because it's a form of oppression of other animals, but our numbers are greater than in all fairness they should be.
But Ronnie, which level is acceptable? Because every single human is going to cause enormous harm to the environment and other animals.
We don't have to all agree on what sort of level is acceptable to currently agree that our current level is too high. That's the thing that's something that can be worked out along the line. But we can all agree that the number of humans on the planet is excessive in terms of what's fair and just towards other animals, and we need to reduce it. Now, how far we need to reduce it is a question of discussion, but we can all agree that we do need to reduce our population.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I don't agree with that being a vegan issue.
Well, I think it depends on the definition of veganism. I'd say whether or not it's a vegan issue, it's definitely an animal liberation issue because our excessive population is a form of oppression of other animals. It's a form of imperialism, like the invasion of the earth by our species and the occupation, rather than the inhabitation of the planet by humans.
But what I understand by animal liberation is that humans stop perceiving animals as resources or slaves, and that they stop exploiting them because of that. But not that humans pretend to cause as little harm as possible, because that would be really impracticable. Impractical. That would be.
But the level of harm that we should properly that is acceptable, right? That can obviously be a debate, but we can still agree that the level of harm that we do at the moment is far in excess of what is fair and just to other animals that share this planet with us. Because that's also a form of oppression. If I run a rabbit over, I'm still oppressing that rabbit, even though that isn't exploitation. It's still oppression.
And I mean, just to jump in quickly, I would say it is part of the scope, to be perfectly honest, like the soil, the trees, the air, all the rest of the planet. It's something we all inhabit. So potentially, although I can understand what David's saying, it's not necessarily a vegan issue, but it's something that we'd have to look at going forward if we're going to continue doing what we're doing. Because even if it's not intentional rights violations, by entering someone else's home, so to speak, just to grow crops and having to do things to protect those crops, we are exploiting others for our own gain. Even if that's sort of like not seen as we're putting them in a farm somewhere or in a cage somewhere. If you're going into a field and spraying it that's full of insects or birds or small mammals, you are exploiting them for your own gain. That gain is the food you want to grow. So, this is something I think we'd naturally encompass moving forward, whether it was a vegan issue or not, because it would be part of the scope. It would be part of protecting the environment for others and for ourselves.
Yeah, the problem with that is what good is a movement without clear boundaries? like if we assume that every little harm that we cause is a vegan issue, then
No,
the
I
vegan
don't
movement
think it's
is
necessarily a
completely
vegan issue.
absurd.
I think just what I'm talking about is as we were moving forward into a vegan world that was exploitation free, as we'd already, let's just say hypothetically, we've already abolished factory farming, we've already abolished things like the circus, SeaWorld, zoos, all of that's already gone. Then things like crop deaths and how can we still further improve our harmony and our relationship and all these things that animal rising would look to focus on. That's where crop
Yeah,
deaths would come into this because we'd be looking at ways of saying,
yeah.
right, we've already moved this exploitation away. We're not doing that anymore. But actually, is there a way that we can do this without this? Yeah, there probably is. So let's do that instead. That's all part of the mentality, I think. It's not necessarily a vegan issue, but it's something that'll be solved with a vegan philosophy going forward, with everyone having that kind of, we want to cause no or the least exploitation we can. I think crop deaths will always come into it naturally because we'll be looking at a better way of growing food. It's not necessarily like, look, why is it up to the vegans to fix it? Because I'd say, well, it's not, but we're the only ones that
Yeah,
are.
but that would be like,
I mean, it's not necessarily the job of vegans to
yeah,
fix any
that
of
would be
these problems
every
per
single.
se, but no one else is gonna, which is why we've got the job.
Yeah, true. But yeah, my objection would be to present the vegan cause as if it had to do directly with those issues.
Yeah. Well, this is, I mean, going back to we touched on this before you joined, the Tristan and Joey debate. I mean, someone made the point, well, isn't it great for lots and lots of people to hear the vegan argument? But I don't think there will be a vegan argument. I think the whole argument will be more or less what we're having now. It'll be about crop deaths. It'll be about protein. It'll be about bees. It'll be about avocados. It'll be a complete waste of time. No one will learn anything. Because I don't think it'll be a vegan
Yeah,
conversation. I think it'll be the
exactly.
conversation that we're talking about now that, you could argue aren't vegan issues. They're questions that vegans get, but you could argue that
Yeah,
they're not vegan issues. Yeah, they're kind of the symptoms of the problem that we're trying to fix.
yeah, but yeah. Do you see, for example, my example for no, now I got confused. Well, for example, can we say that a race car driver is vegan?
What, because of the fuel?
Well,
Because
Yeah,
well,
because it's very
I,
harmful to the
yeah,
environment. It's like the worst sport for the environment.
yeah,
But is Lewis Hamilton vegan?
but whether or not he's vegan, I think it could be
I would
argued
say
that.
he is because he has spoken like
yeah. Personally, I haven't. I mean, I don't know anything really about motor racing at all to get into the statistics of it. But I mean, I've seen what he said, the message and things like that. I mean, I've got no reason to not think so. But if we were going to talk about something like that, then would we not factor in someone that was, say, extremely famous that was traveling all the world doing speaking tours because of their flights damage or all this other stuff? I mean, how far would you
exactly.
take it?
Well, I think you kind of weigh up.
Exactly.
You weigh up the good against harm. It's like I kind of I'll drive in my car to do a stall promoting veganism, right? As I'm driving along in my car, that first of all I'm causing I'm producing carbon emissions that contribute to the climate crisis, which harms other animals. Right, and also there is a risk that I might run an animal over, but I balance that against the fact that I'm going to go and do a stall and educate people to go vegans, and I decide that more good comes out of that harm. Now, I know that's totally a utilitarian calculation, but that's kind of how I look at it, and that's how I would justify doing that.
Well, what about a vegan cruise? I mean, a cruise ship, as far as I know, is one of the most polluting and environmentally damaging things on the planet, and yet we've got these vegan cruise things going around the world all the time, right? So
Well,
how does that work?
why would you need to go on a vegan cruise when you could probably go down the road and there's some beauty spot that you could enjoy? I mean, why would you kind of go on the vegan cruise? What would be the point of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're really harmful to sea
Usually,
life as well.
listen to a speech by James Aspey, I think it used to be.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with stuff like that. I mean, but going back to your example, Ronnie, I'm guessing the reason that you use the car for those kind of fares is because you can't take that stuff on the train too. So surely that falls into that parameter of practicable. If you're the only way that you're going to be able to go and do this outreach is if you can take your equipment to enable you to do it. So it's kind of like, yeah, you know, I get it.
Yeah, because I think you've got kind of the thing is that unless we educate lots more people to go vegan, then we're not going to get very far. And in order to do that, you kind of there's impact in doing that. I mean, like we're speaking on something tonight, which hopefully will make people think and stuff. Now we're using up energy and stuff just through doing this, aren't we? You know what I mean? So like everything we do has some kind of impact, but we think, well, yeah, but like, what good do we do? You know, we're doing some harm, but what good comes out of it? And we're doing that all the time with stuff, you know, and that is, I know that's like a utilitarian thing, but it's not. It's kind of it's unavoidable. And otherwise, if we went somewhere like and said, right, I'm going to be a totally perfect vegan. I'm going to go away somewhere. I'm going to like grow my own food. I'm going to kind of generate my own power. I'm going to, you know, and that means that you don't have the communication with people that you need to have in order to spread the vegan message, and that is another thing that has to be weighed up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, don't shoot me, but I am going to take a tiny bit of Tobias's logic for a moment. And you think if you went,
Bang!
don't worry, it's only a tiny bit. It's only a tiny bit. But if you went to that outreach that you're using as the example, right? And let's say you managed to have 2 or 3 really positive conversations, and those 2 or 3 people went home, and from that day they made changes to their life, then that would be completely worthwhile, because all of the changes that they'd make and the difference that they'd make would outweigh that driving that you did.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's the same with leaflets. Like people go, I've had people go, oh, you're promoting veganism, but like you're giving out those leaflets, and trees are chopped down to produce those leaflets, and animals might need those trees, blah blah blah. But the thing is, you probably only have to turn one person vegan with like thousands of leaflets, and that completely like kind of, you know, causes greater good than the harm that's caused in the production of
Yeah,
those.
I mean, I absolutely don't agree with his stupid examples that he comes up and his hypotheticals, but that there is definitely logic to that. That you know, if you manage to go and do one of these outreach and you manage
Yes, you do, Andy. You're the biggest Tobias fan around. Come on.
I honestly, Tobias, I think is actually not as bad as Reasonable Vegan. I don't think he's quite as bad.
Is anyone as bad as Reasonable Vegan?
I don't think so. Honestly, I honestly am getting the impression that he's trying to be worse than anyone else. Like he's trying to get that title.
Well, I think David suggested that he changed his name, and I think
I think David and Cliff have suggested that. To be honest,
well, we ought to start a petition.
Yeah.
A petition, maybe.
A petition, a single issue campaign to get him to change his name.
Is there an
But
Who did he say his influences were, Roger? Was it is it Humane Hancock and Ed? And Gary
and Cranky Vegan. No. Cranky Vegan and Humane Hancock.
and Urosky, yeah. So he had a bit of a kind of smorgasbord of dodgy people, I think.
Because of course,
just the names that he remembered.
and they don't even agree with one another, do they?
No. I just think it was a collection of names he remembered. If he'd have remembered that Donald Watson dude's name, he'd have probably had it.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, you know, I still can't forgive him. I mean, like basically one of the first things I heard when I tuned in was David said, "Do you know much about the history of
Yeah, that was the first one I ever listened to.
Yeah. And this guy goes, well, somebody called Cross and some other dude, right? And David goes, you mean Donald Watson? I just thought, oh no.
Yeah, and how long ago was that now, David? About 6 weeks ago you was on his show, and still, even on his live today, it's still, I think it's Donald something from the 60s. Like, he still has not realised or learnt a thing.
Yeah, he seems to do it on purpose.
I think that
Like,
honestly, I do. I get the impression now he's kind of realised it's a bit nichey to piss people off because his channel's
yeah,
growing. Like,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Folks, I'm going to have to go because
No,
I've got.
I was about to say. I mean,
Yeah,
we've gone 20 minutes over what normal. So I mean,
yeah,
it's nice chatting. So yeah,
yeah.
I'm gonna say goodbye to everyone. But thanks so much for joining us.
thank you guys.
David. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Take
you. Thank you so much.
See you
care.
same time next Saturday, 8 o'clock. I hope you have a good night, good
Uh,
evening, and good morning wherever you are. Thank you. See you later, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye bye.
bye.
Thank you.
Bye.